Welcome to Beyond the Frets, episode 16. Hope you're having a fantastic 2023. I know I am. I want to welcome the amazing, incredible Sean McGowan to the podcast. He is a fingerstyle jazz guitarist living in Denver. Currently is the chair of the music department at University of Colorado in Denver. He has put out some incredible solo guitar records, including playing the music of Thelonious Monk, standards from the musical My Fair Lady, and much more. He is a very active educational contributor to truefire.com. There's lots of video series where he talks about solo guitar arranging, modern jazz concepts, comping, all that sort of stuff that he is just a master at. I met Sean online, really like a lot of my guests, and then we met in person at the Rocky Mountain Archtop Guitar Festival, which is now one of my favorite perennial events. He actually lives in the area, so he always shows up, as he should. And this past year, we got to connect, and I knew I wanted to tap him for the podcast because he's just got such a great spirit, and you're going to find in this interview, he has such a holistic and empathetic and really human approach to music and education as well. He talks not only about musical concepts that are important, but also things about mental health and physical health. He is a huge proponent of making sure we're in touch with our bodies as guitarists and making sure we're as healthy as possible. And he teaches courses on that. And I was really curious to kind of pick his brain on those topics as it relates to academia. I had such a blast talking to Sean, and I know you're going to really enjoy this as well. But before I start the interview, I want you to please like, share, rate the podcast. Anything you do to get it out would be really helpful. I know this is a one-man operation still, and I'm a little sporadic on posting, but it is certainly one of my goals to get a little team together so we can have this be a more monthly venture. But until then, anything you can do to help out would be greatly appreciated. Without further ado, welcome to Beyond the Frets. Sit down, grab an axe, and get abducted.
Sean.
Hey, Zach. How you doing, man?
Hey, I'm all right. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Good to see you.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this.
Of course. Can you hear me okay?
Sounds great.
Okay, good.
Yeah. How's your New Year kicked off, holiday season?
Great. Very lazily. Lots of couch and Netflix and episodes of Andor right now. Man, I just finished this. I don't know how much time you have to watch Netflix, but it's like just a total stress relief. But if you check out The Peripheral, that is an amazing series.
Okay, I don't know that one.
It's great. It's actually, let's see. Oh, that's on Amazon Prime.
Okay.
But it's based off the book. And if you like futuristic sci-fi stuff, yeah, it's incredible. It's really good.
I do. I do. I honestly do spend, I take time to watch movies and TV. I'm definitely like a cinephile. My dad's in the movie industry, and I kind of just always grew up just watching movies with dad late at night. So I still do that.
Oh, that's so cool. Well, man, I brought it up because I was reading your recent blog just talking about taking time off from the guitar and creating some distance. And that is so important. And that really resonated with a lot of people. And it's true. It's like, just even taking a little bit of time off to watch TV or something, you actually will come back fresher and more inspired than if you had just, stayed in the shed for 2 days straight or whatever.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, I could talk about this forever, but I just feel like, I'm 29, so I'm not like old by any stretch, and I'm not a master expert or anything. But the older I get, the more I am comfortable just playing and teaching music, getting paid a little money, and not being sick. When I was young, I thought I was going to be the next jazz guitar wizard and if I wasn't by the time I was 25, then I was a failure and I should just quit, blah, 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 blah.
Oh man.
We all kind of get that. But now it's like, man, this is for life. This is all for life. And if I can, and no one really told me, in my experience, no one in music school kind of really can prepare you for just the totality of doing this for the rest of your life.
Right.
And the longer I did it, I just realized how difficult and like how taxing it can be and how important those breaks are, because a 2-week break is really nothing in a span of a hopefully 50 plus year career.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, man, I could talk about this forever too, because I think it's so important. And I've always really admired people, observing. And I know that you're an astute observer of just the people that were in it for the long haul. And that's a really important thing to meditate on. And I think that's something that is good to realize at all points of your career. But before we dive in, I know that we're recording. I'm not quite sure the format. Are we on, or are we just rolling, or I guess I'm just curious, is there anything specifically that you want me to do?
It's already happening, baby. It's happening.
Okay, cool. Right on, man.
I'm pretty just chill. And that's kind of the point of this. And quite honestly, like this topic is exactly the type of thing that I like to bring to people. So this is great.
Great. Awesome. Well, while we're talking about it, because you and I are both involved in education, for me, just going through school was a long haul. I mean, it took me 10 years to get my degree, because I was in and out of school. I went to 3 different colleges for my undergrad.
Wow.
By the time I went back the last time and to graduate, I was actually 26. And it was essentially starting over. And one of the things that, in addition to music and playing guitar and education, another thing that I was really passionate about was health education and injury prevention, and basically incorporating that into the pedagogy of studying our instruments. And what happened was I was in a school environment where, in addition to that kind of toxicity that you mentioned with that unhealthy mindset and the weird competition and the vibe and all of that stuff that is so, unhealthy at best to, just excruciatingly detrimental, or even, forces people to quit. That is not what music's about. But in addition to that whole head trip, I became really interested in the physical injury prevention side of it, because not only would I observe a lot of 18 and 19-year-olds walking around with like a support or carpal tunnel or all of these issues, but the teachers as well. And I just thought it was strange that no one ever talked about that. No one ever talked about keeping your head together, keeping your body together, keeping your attitude together for the long haul of a life in music. Just no one even talked about it. Yeah. And it was weird. It was kind of an elephant in the room, seeing all of these people injured. And right around that point in my life, I was involved with different dance companies. And that was cool, because as a solo guitar player, it was a completely different musical experience for me. I was working with people who were deeply involved in music, but in a completely different way from musicians.
Right.
They didn't obviously have theory terms and things to talk about that way. So that was a really interesting phase, working with different modern dancers at that point while I was getting my solo thing together and all of that. But one thing that was apparent immediately was the difference in their physical regimen and just their attention to injuries, obviously, and preventing those from musicians. And so the more I thought about all of these things, and books were starting to come out in the 90s about this, it made me really realize how there's just this huge gap or void in education about just taking care of yourself, whether you're talking about emotional or psychological care. Mental wellness is a huge issue now, of course, in education, but it kind of always has been there, as well as physical stuff. So I've been doing a lot of research over the years, and I finally got the green light last month to write a book about it, and I'm super stoked about it.
Wow.
I'm starting this year working on a book, and it's tentatively titled The Holistic Guitarist. And it's going to be published by String Letter Media. They publish Acoustic Guitar Magazine. And I already have 4 books with them just on like guitar methods and music. But this is, I laid this on them last year, and they were really into it. They thought, wow, this is a really interesting thing to write about. So there's going to be no music in this book, but just a lot of exploration and advice, not only about emotional and physical well-being, but just the creative process in general, because those were things that I had always had been looking for. In addition to theory and chord voicings and how to improvise and transcribe and listening and all of that stuff, I wanted advice on how to do this. How do you make a living? How do you keep your head together?
Yeah.
How do you stay inspired? How do you stay creative? All of those things that, we all, I think, have to kind of piece together over time.
Right. I mean, all those things, the chord voicings and all that element is so teachable, as we know. I could show you all the drop two voicings. I could do that all day, but and that's also something that can be kind of more, not exactly copy and pasted, but you can do that with a lot of students. But right. You can't necessarily copy and paste something about mental wellness or someone's specific needs as an artist and musician. So I totally agree that it was something that I yearned for and kind of just figured out. And I appreciate that part of the process, but I also have seen so many people just drop out of music entirely because they couldn't figure it out. And they didn't have the support from their peers or mentors or bandmates to kind of help piece them through all the other non-musical stuff that goes into this, which is, as we know, just so tough and so just kind of just have to be autodidactic and fall on your butt 1,000 times. I still am all the time.
Absolutely right. And when you factor in how difficult it is to make a living financially, it just compounds it, several times over, to the point where most people just kind of, they just forget about it.
Yep. The attrition rate 3 to 5 years after music school is I'm sure, I don't know the numbers, but I'm sure it's insane as far as people who are not full-time or really pursuing music, I guess, as their financial means, which is fine, of course. But you just have to wonder, well, why do we even have music majors if they're not going to do this?
I've thought about that. Yeah, I've thought about that a lot over the years, to the point where I've actually sometimes felt guilty about it at first, and then all of a sudden I started changing my mindset around that, saying I think inviting somebody to experience music with you, whether it's in your guitar studio or in some other format, maybe you're playing a gig and somebody's there with you, but somebody specifically working with you in school, that's going to affect their life in a really beautiful way. And I don't think that we as educators need to feel beholden, like I did for a long time, that they're going to have a career or be successful or be able to make money, all these things, that's not on us. That's not our responsibility. And they might not even want that. I mean, the music could be for them just something to really enrich their lives. So I think we're really doing, a lot of good just by working with people. And I've been doing this long enough now that I have all kinds of stories of students that have gone on to do great things in music and still are, or other people that have gone on to the completely different careers and they don't look back, at a degree in guitar with any regret, or, it's it really opened up a lot of doors for them just in the way it changed their thinking. And as soon as I started realizing that, I felt, a lot better, just in terms of the guilt part of it. But really, I think it deepened my sense of mission with it. As okay, just in spreading the goodness through music, both through recordings and performances, and then teaching, obviously. And interestingly, man, especially since COVID, numbers have increased. I know they have where I am. The number of people going into music school is actually going up. And I think a big part of that through COVID is that people wanting to do what they want to do, and if they wanted to study music and maybe their parents were against it or they didn't think, that's not stopping them anymore. They're just I want to go get a degree in music. And I really applaud that. So it's interesting and maybe a little ironic that with everything on the table now, a lot of people are realizing that they just want to study music because they want to.
so many people I knew or so many anecdotes over COVID that, with so much space just off or being alone or whatever, being out of your normal element, out of the daily grind of getting up, going to work, doing all that, people just realized, I've been stuck here forever. I really want to be here. So let's make that happen. I know so many people that have just totally shifted gears, which is awesome. I just wish it didn't take, a pandemic to do that. But,
Right. Well, what kind of advice do you give to your students in school? What kind of questions do they ask, I guess, first? Do they ask you about forging a career in music, or how do you deal with all of that in your lessons?
Again, I'm not very old, but I do connect with my students a lot on that because what's interesting is that I graduated undergrad, I think 7 or 8 years ago. And these kids, we're already 2 generations. There's already a disconnect between what culturally and just everything. So the way they think about and interact with music school is way different from my experience, which is very interesting because I teach at the school that I went to. So I kind of see it from all angles, and it's really weird and cool. And I think a lot of them don't know what they want to do necessarily, but even to more of a degree than I personally saw when I was in school. And a lot of them, they're really interested in music. They don't know if they love jazz, but they like improvising. They don't know if they want to do classical. The genre thing especially is really fluid. And I'm trying to kind of really double down on that, because I actually said in my interview for the head of jazz position, which is an ongoing thing, I was I don't really care if they play jazz when they leave. And kind of to your point, it's I guess it doesn't matter if they play music at all, because I want to teach them things that are just so universal. I want them to be effective communicators. I want them to be good collaborators. I want them to be able to express themselves and be confident. Those are things that really have nothing to do with music. But but my expertise is in music and guitar and all in jazz, so I can apply those kind of filters and idioms to those elements. So at the end of the day, I just want them to be confident and capable and excited and having fun, especially having fun. But I've spent class, I teach the big band, and I took a whole hour, 15 minutes, and I just asked them up front, hey, what do you guys want to do after school? And we just spend the whole session just talking about all the past. All right, here's the grad school thing. Here's why you would go to grad school. Here's why you wouldn't. Here's the situations where going to grad school is good. Blah, blah, blah. Here's why I went. Here's what I liked. Here's what I didn't like. All right, if you're not going to grad school, you're going to take a break, which is what I also did. Here's all the possible things. Here's all the types of gigs. What types of gigs can you do? Just kind of breaking it down very, the minutia of it. Because again, those are things I figured out on my own, and I'm just trying to give them as much of a head start, and just kind of, you just have to know what you don't know. And they don't know really anything, right? They just see music as something that's fun and fuels them, which is great. But they definitely are searching pretty heavily for just any idea, a plan.
That's so great that you open that up to them at all, and they're very lucky to have you to be able to talk about that kind of stuff, because certainly no one talked about that when I was in school. But that's great. I do a similar thing in this class that I have been teaching for a few years now at CU Denver. It's called The Holistic Musician, and it's open to anybody. All majors can take the class. And in addition to the mental wellness and the physical wellness and all of that stuff, we talk a lot about career and kind of trying to define it in terms of defining it, how it relates to your personality. So I have them do a whole bunch of reflection assignments, and we have pretty deep discussions about what things are important to them. And it could be just pragmatic things like, do you like being on the road? Do you like traveling? Are you more of a homebody? Do you like working with other people? Or are you more of kind of a loner? Maybe you're more fit to work in the studio by yourself for 12 hours at a time? All of those things that I think a lot of students don't think about. They maybe go into school with an idea like, I'm going to be a famous rapper or a famous rock star or a famous jazz guitarist, the next whatever, Matheny or Kurt Rosenwinkel or whoever. And unfortunately, that's such a narrow lens, but it's the one that we were all kind of inherited when you go to school. It's like, oh, well, I have to do this. I have to accept doing this rather than doing it on my own terms. And one of the things that I really appreciate about younger students now is that they're not accepting things like that. Like they are wanting to do things on their own terms, whether that's an informed, outlook or not. And so then our purpose as educators, I guess, is to inform them and give them the tools they need to actually follow through with that. But it's interesting. The landscape is changing so much that it's really important. I think necessary. I mean, it's like the stuff that we're talking about is integral to being a successful person, whether you're a musician or not.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that I think you're hinting at or talking about is it's not black or white. It's not like you're a rock star or you don't play music.
Right.
And that's what I think a lot of students or younger people just kind of don't know all of the in-betweens and just all the ways that you can make it happen successfully to some degree, whatever that means. But it doesn't mean, you're like either super mega famous or you're just destitute and not doing anything. There's such a spectrum.
Yeah, totally agreed. One of the cool things we have a class at our school that's called General Recital. And I taught that class for years. And basically what it is, it's a forum for all students. So there's about 250 students in that class. It's in a big performance auditorium. And it's just guests. You curate guests from all facets of the industry. So entertainment law attorneys, publishers, songwriters, performers, engineers, people that just do like Foley work and sweetening or post-production or anything, or people that work with TV and film on the audio side, all of these different things. And it's cool because they come in and they tell the students the same thing. They're like, oh, when I got to school, I thought I was going to be whatever, the next rock star or the next own my own studio or have my own label or all those kind of romantic things. And then when I was in school or after, I discovered this occupation that I didn't even know existed. And they find that they have a passion for it. So I think that and a lot of the other reasons we're talking about still makes school a very viable option for somebody that doesn't really quite know what they want to do. But they know that they want to be involved with the arts on some level.
Well, so I'm curious, I kind of want to put this back on you. Like it took you 10 years or a number of years to get your undergrad and whatever the circumstances, but then like you have a doctorate now and like all this stuff. So like how did your kind of educational journey continue to where you wanted to go all the way? And now you find yourself as a full-time educator, in addition to being just an absolute monster, solo guitarist and clinician and arranger and all that stuff. Like how did your teaching self kind of grow alongside your performing self?
So, I've really loved teaching, and I'd like to just say that right off the bat, because a lot of times people feel like they get pushed into teaching and they don't like to teach. Yeah. And my mom was a public school teacher. I grew up in Bangor, Maine.
Okay.
Very, very humbly. It was just her and I, and she was a public school teacher for years. And so, that to say, one of the big reasons why I was in and out of school for many years, was I put myself through school. So I relied on scholarships, or, I would go to like a good school and then I'd have to drop out and I would go work at hospital warehouses and restaurants. I mean, I waited tables for 10 years. Wow. And, so, I was kind of in and out. And so I consider, in terms of the teaching and the player part, I always considered myself, and very fortunate that I was a street player too. Like I was playing gigs and teaching. And I started teaching when I was in high school, just, real random, casual, giving lessons to friends and things like that. But I just have always loved teaching in the sense of just the exchange of information and talking and learning and growing, because as a teacher, that's what you do when you have to do it and demonstrate it. You're constantly having to think about how to do it in different ways. So I really love that. And obviously it was a good way to supplement performance income. which has gone down over the years
yeah.
for like most working musicians.
Yeah.
And so it got to the point where I finally, the whole time I was in school, I questioned the value of a degree and all of that. And in hindsight, I'm really glad that I did finally get a bachelor's degree. And what that specifically allowed me to do was start teaching adjunct faculty. So when I graduated with my undergrad, I immediately started teaching at University of Maine, where I was living at the time, and also Bowdoin College. And that kind of got me in the door of teaching higher ed. At that point, I had been already teaching in public schools, in music stores, and I knew that what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to be, and I think that's a part of the process. Is like, I knew, for example, I wasn't a band kid, so I didn't want to teach middle school band, and I have respect for those kinds of music educators, but a lot of it was just kind of narrowing down what I wanted to do via knowing what I didn't want to do. So eventually, I was teaching adjunct for about 3 years, and I think, as you know, that's kind of like terrible. I mean, it's great in some ways, but it's a terrible way to make a living. It's almost impossible. So I got to the point where I was living in Maine. I was like teaching at 2 colleges, 2 stores, gigging all the time, and waiting tables, and still kind of not making a living.
Wow.
And I did that for years, man. So I decided that I wanted to go to grad school after a break, and I applied. And it's kind of a long story, but I ended up I knew that I needed a TA to go to school. That was the only way I was going to be able to afford it. And I was planning on going to USC, and then that didn't work out with the money side of it. So they said, well, if you come back the following year, we'll make you a TA. And I couldn't do it. So in the meantime, I found a program in Philadelphia called University of the Arts that had a 1-year master's program. And that's what I did. And I went down to Philadelphia, lived there for a year. It was super intensive. It was wonderful. And at the same time, by that time, I knew that I wanted to teach in higher education. And also at that time, the minimum requirements for a full-time gig were changing from a master's degree to a doctorate. Like the master's degree was a terminal degree, like in the early 2000s. And it seemed like that just changed overnight. So long story short, I deferred my enrollment at USC for a year, went to UArts, and then contacted USC. And I said, hey, how about I just go get my master's, and then I'll come out here and start working on my doctorate. Would you still honor, your promise of being a TA? And they did, amazingly.
Wow.
So that's what I did. And I moved out to LA. I got married, and my wife and I moved out there, and USC was wonderful. I got to work with Frank Potenza, Joe DiOrio, and Pat Kelly, and just be in LA. And it was really great.
Man, that's awesome. That's quite a move. Was it culture shock, or had you been out there before?
I'd been out there before, on and off, but I kind of moved around a lot. I went to, I'm from Maine originally, but I finished high school in New York City, so in the Lower East Side, and I'd lived in Boston for years, so that wasn't like the first city that I'd moved to. But I loved it, actually. The guitar scene and the music scene in general in LA is so good. You would love it. The weekly gathering was the John Pisano Guitar Night.
Yeah. I've heard of that.
Coming from the East Coast, I think I was a little suspect of LA at first. And then moving out there, I was immediately like, wow, there is just such a great scene. Everybody there was so friendly. And there was just this real camaraderie among guitar players in Los Angeles. It was just so nice. Coming from Boston, which is kind of hard, it's like East Coast, it's very competitive. A city like LA was very welcoming, and people were cool. And the thing that was really fun about those John Pisano guitar nights is that everybody was there. Like students could hang there, of all ages. So there were undergrads and grad students, and people were older. And then all of these LA session guys would hang out there, and all the great jazz guitar players. And it was just this big, wonderful scene. And everybody would hang out, and everybody was, would sit in and play. And it was, it's really cool. Like those things are very rare. I know that Frank Vignola's trying to kind of replicate that with this Birdland guitar night now. That's the whole idea.
Right. One thing you mentioned that I think is really, really important is kind of realizing what you don't want to do. And that was a big thing for me because I mean, I said yes to everything. So much awesome stuff. And then instead of defining like what I absolutely wanted to do, I realized, okay, I'm never doing that again. Okay, right. Definitely not doing that. Not, and then once you say no to those things, and it's so hard to say no because, in my 20s and I'm trying to make ends meet, and it's like that scarcity thing. It's like, well, if I don't say yes, then they're not going to call me again. Then blah, blah, blah. So it took me so long to just start saying like no. Now it's like my favorite word. But because I know that when I say no to something, it actually means saying yes to myself. Because I'm saying no to this. It's not because I don't like you or the music. It's not personal. It's just I know that this is going to take me away from the things that feed me in whatever way, artistically or financially or whatever it is that my aesthetic. And I feel like I'm at a point where I really want to go deeper, not wider. Been able to spend all my 20s, just going wide, just like doing all the things. And there's of course a ton I haven't done because it's only been a short span compared to someone like you. But I do know that I'm really hoping to go deeper for now and kind of see where that goes. And right now that's education, and like just my own like writing and playing. So I'm super excited for that. But what I was just telling students, just say yes to a whole bunch of stuff, start figuring out things you don't really like or things that, at the end of the day, you just feel like, that didn't really fulfill me. That didn't feed me other than maybe it was good money. You got to figure out what's beyond that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, everything that you're talking about, of course, we all resonate with, but it's ineffable in the sense that you have to experience it. And what you're doing is you're building your inner compass or learning how to trust your inner compass, I think.
I love that.
Of course, we all have to do gigs that you don't want to do. Of course, like you got to pay rent, you have to pay bills. But there is something you mentioned that like the mindset, what people I've heard referred to as the mindset of scarcity. And that's a pretty heavy thing when you start thinking about it, like settling for less because you're a musician or realizing that you have to starve or be destitute. And I remember I met this woman a long time ago. I remember her now distinctly, but she was this artist in Maine and she was very wealthy. And she said, yeah, I never bought into that whole like starving artist trip. And it really kind of affected me. I was almost kind of insulted at first because I was like struggling, and trying to figure it out. I thought like, how did you do it then? Like how, if you,
right.
all these kinds of things. And I think that everybody has to figure it out. But at the same time, part of that inner compass and that journey is staying true to what you believe in musically. And it's weird because it's ineffable because it's hard to say. And it's especially difficult to say to a student where it was, just wrap it up in one sentence. It's difficult to be concise, but you have to do what it takes to make ends meet and but at the same time, not compromise your musical vision. And I've heard it summed up in the way that like, well, if I take care of the music, then everything else will kind of fall into place. And that may or may not be true. I mean, that doesn't mean that you can be like completely ignorant to all other circumstances and conditions and things. I mean, you don't want to be naive about it, but I think through a lot of different processes, like keeping a journal, for example, and certainly recording yourself and really checking in with yourself a lot deeply and asking those big questions, you can make important decisions. And man, the big one, the debate you have all the time, I know that I have with musician friends here, not only in Denver, but man, around the country, we talk about local gigs, that pay like $75 or, $80 or maybe $100. And then I'll have a friend in Seattle say like, you guys make $100? Like we make, we talk about it at $70. It was like, obviously you're not going to be able to pay rent doing that. So, but then you say, all right, that's it. I'm not going out of the house for less than $200 or $300 or whatever it is. Right. And of course, anybody else like outside of the music industry, unless they're famous or really wealthy, they'd be looking at us right now going, gosh, you poor, that's the mindset of scarcity. But the problem is like then you say, well, I'm not going to leave the house, for this amount of money, unless I really love the musicians that I'm going to be playing with, or I respect them and I love the music, all of those things, of course. But then the problem is that the phone doesn't ring, right? And so then all of a sudden you have to make a choice. So like, are you going to go out and do that gig for $75? And I'm not talking about, again, like friends or beautiful music that you want to play, that it's for the art's sake, but just working. And everybody has to figure that out, which can be very harsh, because you can feel like, it's a systemic issue, right? There's a reason why musicians' incomes haven't gone up since the 70s, or, they've actually gone down. I made more money playing in a rock cover band when I was 19. We used to make between $300 and $500 a night. And, that was a long time ago, but the point being is that your kind of average local working musician, the pay has gone down a lot.
Yep.
So what are you going to do? And that's what everybody has to figure out,
I know. I've been thinking about that so much because when I went to grad school, I went to Bowling Green State University in Northern Ohio. There's this bass player named Jeff Halsey. He's been there for like almost 40 years, really a long time. And he's just like a local legend. He's done it all. And he was like, we're coming up on the 45th anniversary of the $100 gig, man. I'm like, oh, geez, that's so dark. And I think about that a lot, and it's so tough because it's actually really funny you say that, because like 2 weeks ago, I actually had that thought. I was like, I'm not leaving my house for less than $100. And like, I wasn't going to like announce it, but I was just like, I was just like really pondering that. And like, I don't really know what I'm doing with that thought right now. Other than that, I'm just not doing a lot of sideman gigs because I want to teach more. But I just really don't have an answer. It's just something I'm thinking about a lot, because like, I love playing. Like, I have to perform. Like that's what fuels me the most. And if I don't do that, then I feel disingenuous to my students, because I have to be able to show them what I'm talking about by playing it and showing them. All right. Yeah. But it's also like, our income is going down, what with the value of dollar inflation. It's like been the same for so many years, and it's super tough to like try to just like fight and like advocate for like your worth. And it's been kind of, I've been kind of dark on it for a while, which I'm really grateful that I love teaching. And even though like I have two, like my gigs are adjunct. Like I teach at two schools adjunct. I teach at a studio, and I have my own students. So it's like the thing you talked about, like got like 10 different income sources that, combine into some almost enough, basically. But I'm more okay with that right now, that it's teaching, because that does really fuel me. And I spent a lot of years only gigging, and I felt like I was just like losing my mind and making no money, and just, that was tough. So I've kind of made that switch, but it's not really any difference. It's sort of a lateral shift for me, because I'm not really making any more or less. It's just, I just feel better about it right now, because I don't know what to do about the gigging situation. I don't know how to like figure that out, other than just kind of go deep into my trio, which is my favorite kind of medium as far as my own playing, and just kind of do that.
Yeah, man. So this is what I think. And I truly believe this. You feel like you're at a crossroads, and it's so tempting to go dark, and it's normal to go dark and think, and you're like, okay, we've got this systemic problem that like I can't change or you can't change. But where you are right now and what you just described, I really believe that that's kind of like that magic moment where like something will shift. And so what I mean by that is that like you've explored all of these different possibilities, and you've determined after many years of doing this that, as you described, what you are willing to do and what you're not willing to do. And I think that that's where like most people would just leave it at that and just be dark about it, or go on and be bitter or whatever. But this is like, you're at the intersection right now where you will figure out and determine everything that will be a part of your identity and your like future success. And that includes finance. Like, I think that's like, so those moments, as tempting as it is to go dark, it's really a gift, because then you can sit there and say, all right, well then forget about it. Like, if none of this stuff matters anyway, then I'm only going to do the stuff that resonates with me, or that is directly, what do I want to do? Even though it might not be within the normal trajectory of who you are as a jazz guitarist or a gigging guitarist or a guy on the scene or whatever. And so then I think when in those moments, it feels like these kind of make or break moments, and they come and go, right? So it's not like you'll just figure it out and then everything will be wonderful forever, but it will set you on, continually set on the course, because you're already on a path. Like, you've already created a path. And for me, just watching your Instagram videos and your harmonic sensibilities and the way that you teach and stuff, you've already put a lot of time. You've got a very defined trajectory. And I think that these moments, like when I look back, something that, for example, in my case, I knew that when I was really young, I always wanted to write books. I was like, man, how am I ever going to like get a book deal or whatever? And all of these things, because you start setting your intention in one specific area, you have no idea how that may manifest itself full circle in another way. Right. So like in my case, in grad school, I had to take a music journalism class, which I was like, all right, that's cool. But, I don't want to be a music journalist. I don't want to be a critic or anything like that. But doing that actually hooked me up with acoustic guitar. Like, I would have never have connected with the publisher. And this was like a long time ago. This was 2004. So the staff has changed a lot, but I connected from having to do this assignment in music journalism that started me writing like columns for them for years and being like an educational advisor. And eventually they came to me and asked me to write a book. So, and then now I have 4 books with them. And,
wow.
And so it was this really beautiful thing, but that never would have happened if I hadn't have like, kind of set myself, like, all right, well, I'm going to do this in addition to just doing gigs and teaching lessons. What are the things that I really want to do? And some of those might not even be related to music, but it's really important to just like really, cast the net wide, but have that dictated by what resonates in your heart. And if you keep thinking about something over and over again, it's going to be different for everybody. And so for me, in my case, like in addition to jazz, and I mean, I love all different styles, funk and everything. But I also, since I was really young, I really resonated with like acoustic fingerstyle guitar. So by having those kinds of things, that opened up a lot of doors for me that wouldn't have if I was just like a straight ahead jazz guitar player or something.
Right.
Or I know, peripherally, like people that are interested in media or film, like they start doing library work, music library stuff or composition, or they just get this thing that's completely built around their identity. And again, even with music, like I was aware of things that I could not do. Like, I'm not a singer-songwriter. I'm not a singer, but I can do this, this, and this. And just those really taking inventory of all of the things that you can do and that you're passionate about doing and that you want to do can be very powerful and help you do all of these things that contribute to making a living.
Love that so much. And honestly, thank you for the advice, because I'm going through it and I've gone through this many times, but this currently definitely a crossroads, like you said. And I am definitely optimistic for everything. And it's funny you mentioned books. I'm extremely interested in writing a book, even just for my own sake, because I have things I want to talk about, but regardless, it's definitely on the bucket list.
Yeah, I mean, all of those things, will open up doors. I mean, for me, like I knew that I wanted to get into multimedia, and then just opportunities happened for me that connected me with TrueFire, for example. And 14 courses with those guys, and they've been amazing to work with. And
wow.
it's just so like, number one, hang in there, man. That's just like, just keep doing what you're doing, because it's important. People need it. And people want to hear your voice, your teaching voice, your musical voice, your compositions, your all of that, or social media presence. Now, that's something that I'm not really great at myself, but I've seen a lot of people who have really kind of either said, man, social media, like, that's not my thing, and were bitter about it, or they say that's not my thing because it's just, I'm too busy, or that's not my thing. And then other people that have literally like created incredibly lucrative careers that weren't even available 5 or 10 years ago, and that's going to continue to be the case. And I've seen a lot of people that I look up to that are older than me, for example, that have said like, oh man, social media is lame, I'm not going to do the Instagram thing or whatever, and be really kind of negative about it. And then people like Frank Vignola or Bruce Foreman be like super positive about it and just be like, wow, I'm going to do that, and Bruce, and I know, Bruce is like, he's an optimist. I mean, yes, of course he's a great musician and he's, all these things, but Bruce is this amazing optimist, and he can kind of take anything and make a great situation out of it. And it's really important to observe that, because people like him have created a lot of opportunities that a lot of other people maybe in his shoes wouldn't have, because they automatically rejected a new forum.
Yeah, like if there's anything I just want to just keep always, it's like when I'm that age or any age, I want to be open to what's new. Because obviously, like I'm in the generation of social media. Like my life there's always been computers and stuff. So like, it's kind of obvious to me, but there's going to be something new that's not going to be obvious to me. And I'm going to have to either be like steadfast, be like, no, blah, 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 or try to embrace it, or just or respect it and not engage, depending on my situation. And it kind of just reminds me of like, all the old hats that are, just jaded about the music business and the industry and like records and like digital music and Spotify, all that stuff. To me, I'm like, I understand, we're getting like the raw end of the deal a lot of times, but also there's no playbook. The only playbook we know is the one that is in this generation and maybe the one before us, because we relate everything within like our lifetime, which is pretty short as humans. But like recorded music has literally only existed for like 100 years. There's no playbook. We're in the most nascent existence of this media, being possible. So like, it's kind of, I'm going to have to follow, obviously it doesn't mean I'm just going to let people take advantage of me, but there also isn't so much I can do on the individual level. So I'm just going to have to keep adapting and just see where it goes. Because this is all new. This is completely new. And obviously with, social media, that's like the generational cycles the technological cycles are so short. The innovations, like it's like really scary. We're just going to have to keep up with it. And but it doesn't have to be embrace or fade away, but it's at least just don't be mad or jaded or like, dark about it.
I think so, because, you start reading a lot of books, whether it's a biography of a musician or a history, but whatever, you realize that, man, this has never been easy for musicians. And I remember reading, Grant Green talked about it, but lots of people of, what maybe we think of the classic golden era, like the 50s and 60s. And then they were complaining about how there were no sessions. Yeah. Grant was like, there's no sessions in New York happening, and it's not like the way it was back in the day. Yeah. And it's interesting and sobering at first to read those accounts. And it's never been easy for musicians, but, so that's one reason not to buy into the good old days trip, because it's really probably didn't exist. But at the same, and what all those musicians had to endure, I mean, it's just like unthinkable. But there are always people that like broke through and kind of did it on their own terms, and there always will be. And so cultivating an optimistic attitude and one just being open to possibilities is super, super important. I think that's more important than anything for anybody, but especially musicians and creative artists.
Yeah, kind of, tying this all back to education. I'm just really curious. Like you say, you teach this like holistic class, and like it sounds like you've had a lot of work in the educational sphere of teaching these kind of broader musical courses where it's not like, here's how you like play altered dominance. Like, I'm just curious about how you've gone about that as an educator, because I'm very interested in those topics, and how I can kind of bring them into like what I do. And now you're the chair of the department. Like, tell me about all that.
Yeah. Well, so back when I was going through school, so I went to Miami for a year, and then I went to New England Conservatory, and then I finally, when I was 26, I went to Berkeley. And in hindsight, there's pros and cons about any school you go to, any environment, of course. And I also believe a lot of it is what you make of it. But at that particular time in my life, I was 26 and 27, and I was like, the last place that I wanted to be was in school, and being a music major, none of my credits from Miami or NEC had transferred, right? Of course, so I had to start all over again. And so for me at that point, the last thing that I wanted to do was be a performance major or be a part of the guitar department. And I don't say that in any way, to be critical of the guitar department. That was just where I was at that time.
Yeah.
So I became a professional music major, which was basically like a self-designed curriculum. So I took a lot of classes in music therapy and education and history of art classes. And I did some guitar. Basically what I did was they give you ratings at Berkeley. And so I had high ratings, and that allowed me to take nice ensembles, really good ensembles with good players, and also do workshops with Mick Goodrick. So that was the guitar part of it. But everything else was kind of away from the guitar, because at that point I really wanted to kind of figure out my thing, and explore what I wanted to explore, whether it was like hip at Berkeley or not, which the stuff that I was into at the time definitely was not hip at Berkeley. Like, or in school, it was like, I was kind of going a different direction and everybody else was doing something else. And so, so that started it for me. And what I realized was that, like, kind of by trying to forge my own path and follow the music that I was interested in, that really reinforced it a lot stronger. And along the way, teachers, I was very blessed to have great teachers like Mick and Joe that were always supportive. They're like, just do your own thing, so later on, I realized that, of course, for years I taught the core classes like theory and ear training and improv and all those things. But even within the context of those courses, I tried to have a greater picture. So we would study like visual art, for example, or Zen or philosophy or things like that, just informing. So it's more than just transcribing a solo. Of course, you have to transcribe and you want to broaden your ears and develop your vocabulary. But when we're talking about improvisation, that's such a deep aesthetic that is so much larger than just jazz, for example.
Yes.
And those kinds of things. And what I'm realizing now, since I got into the admin side of it, which was totally by accident, that's not something that I wanted to do. I was in this kind of extraordinary position where they needed a chair and they asked me to do it. And so I did it. And now that I'm doing it, I actually kind of enjoy it, because it's a lot of the same principles that I'm attracted to in my guitar playing, which is problem solving. So maybe like being a solo guitar player, you're constantly solving problems, which is when you're creating arrangements. As a guitar player, you're solving problems because you're like, well, I want to sound like a piano player. I want to sound like Oscar Peterson.
Yeah.
I've got a problem that I have to solve. And now I'm doing that same kind of thing, but just from a different perspective. So I guess I've always been interested in all of these other things as just one complete picture.
Yeah, man, that's so awesome. Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I really, really appreciate this. It's so awesome to connect with you. Really, really respect you as an educator, person, guitarist, all the things. I was listening to your Monk album this week. Just ridiculous. So awesome. And that's a whole nother interview about talking about adapting Monk on a guitar. It's like amazing work.
Thanks. Yeah. I don't know if I could play any of that stuff now. That was quite a thing going through.
I understand.
Like, talk about problem solving. Yeah. Like that whole thing, like, like I think just certain things, like Trinkle Tinkle, I always like to do things in the same key. Like I don't ever like to put things in a different key just because it's easier.
Like a friendly key. Yeah.
Weird and wrong to me. So Trinkle Tinkle is like got a low E flat, but the rest of the strings are in standard. And some of those, there were some alternate tunings in there and a lot of right hand fretting things. But those are things that I love doing to try to get the sound of harmony and you do the same thing. Like when I listen to you play, I think we both have that sensibility and harmony and chord voicings that was not very traditional in terms of the arc of traditional jazz guitar players. I always listen to piano players and vocal groups and things like that more. And so it's always a compromise, right? You're not going to be able to get like this perfect Bill Dobbins or Billy Strayhorn arrangement on the guitar, or piano voicings, or like the sound of a bowed, like Yo-Yo Ma's beautiful tone.
Yeah.
But you can come up with your own thing while you're trying to approximate what you have in your mind for a sound anyway.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like if I have any sound or anything that I call my own, it's been through solo guitar, and especially harmony. Harmony has always just piqued my interest the most. It's like, as far as surface level things that I hear when I listen to music, it's always harmony first, and then I have to open my ears and listen to everything else. It's always a harmony. So like I'm, like you said, like Oscar Peterson, like I wish I was like the Nelson Riddle Orchestra. Like I'm just obsessed with those old arrangements. Like I just wish I could be that on the guitar, and I can't. But then I figure out how to do it my own way, and it's so much fun.
Yeah, agreed. And you listen to any of those, like any Frank Sinatra recording you put on, or, just coming out of the holidays, all those Christmas recordings that Ella Fitzgerald made, like Billy May and like all of those arrangers, man, or Duke, of course, Duke Ellington and Billy Strayhorn, their writing and their sensibilities have had a big influence on me. And I know they have on a lot of people, like Kenny Burrell leaps to mind. And so just the concepts of having like major sevenths and sharp nines on the, in the same chord, and like if it's a dominant chord and they've got those kinds of, because it's colors and all of those things, that movement, I was always attracted to that much more. And it's harder to play that way. And I think if you have the right trio, you can do it. But certainly in a kind of a band with horns and pianist, it's difficult to play that, if not impossible, because you just don't have that power of the piano, that range.
Totally.
I've seen some 7-string players try to get that happening with the low part, but it's not the same, and there's no way that you can do that. So I think playing either solo guitar or maybe in kind of a chamber environment that doesn't have any percussion or anything that's going to take away your volume. That's why I think, I love listening to Jim Hall in those small, like, chamber settings. Because he was such a composer, the way that he thought, an arranger. And I just was recently reading about him studying with Vicente Gomez, and I knew that he studied classical music, and I knew that he'd studied a little bit of classical guitar, but I wasn't aware of the extent of influence that Gomez had on him and his thinking. And it was that kind of, that their study together really was what brought out his own curiosity and sensibilities with inner line movement and counterpoint and all of these ways that now we can point to and say, oh, well, that's kind of basically like the beginning of modern jazz guitar comping and voicing, if you will, with a lot of that stuff, and that he recorded with various people in those days. And so it's really interesting. But solo guitar is I always loved it. And for me, the person that was kind of the person that opened the door for me in terms of how I wanted to achieve that, well, two people actually, Tuck Andrus and Earl Klugh.
Okay.
Solo guitar records, which are fantastic. And then I ended up meeting Tuck when I was 19 and becoming friends with him. And that was really that really kind of continued to inspire me to go in that direction because it's just really like limitless. I mean, and now I think there's more solo guitar players, especially after COVID. That was an opportunity for people to get their
right.
But it's really something that I think every guitar player should be able to do, because if you have some solo guitar stuff together, no matter what happens on the gig, like you can make it happen. Like if the rest of the band
exactly,
singer, all of those things. Like if you can play pretty convincing solo guitar, you can pretty much do anything. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, like playing in a band is like a piece of cake, you know. I mean, it's different challenges and different aesthetics, of course, but just the sheer level of exposure and responsibility that you have in a solo guitar, you know, environment is like, even just playing gigs with a bass player, I'm like, whew, man, I don't have to worry.
Oh my God, I know.
Yeah.
Totally.
So it's really, but in addition to the you know, pragmatic value of it, it's just a very freeing thing to do musically, especially if you're into harmony, because now that you don't have to worry about staying in time. I mean, of course, sometimes you want to stay in time, but you can push and pull. And now that I've been doing this a while, I used to have this frame of mind where like, got to keep the time going and I got to keep the bass line going and all these multiple parts going all the time. And now I'm kind of like, you know, you don't have to keep that going. And the older I get, the more I appreciate Joe Pass in that you could always hear the song whenever Joe was playing.
Yep.
And his time was just this beautiful ebb and flow, like the tide coming in. Like he's swinging and then all of a sudden he's out of time. And my favorite recording, I mean, they're all great, but especially that album he did called Blues for Fred. It's his Fred Astaire album. And just the way that he comes in and out of time and plays melody, and it's just masterful the way that he played solo guitar. I mean, the more I listen to Joe Pass, I'm just continually in awe of his taste as a solo guitar player.
Absolutely. I was just telling a student before this that like, I just love dissecting songs through solo guitar and solo guitar arranging, because you just really just have a love and respect and reverence for song and melody. And you see how, you know, well, what once was, you know, written for an orchestra or written for a totally different instrumentation. Well, that certainly adds some of the character and some of why we love it. But actually the song and the melody and harmony on its own are just so great that it can be played by anyone, whether it's one person or 1,000. And that's when I really kind of figured out just how the importance of song and melody and just respecting it while also blowing it up sometimes.
Yeah. Oh man. You know, speaking of the Monk, when I was really working on that Monk record, I'd always loved his music, of course, but when you really dig into his music, you realize how simple it is. Like, it's just so simple, like so melodic. And it's funny because, you know, sometimes people will be like, oh, I can't listen to Monk, it's just too jarring or whatever. I was like, wow. Because of course, despite the, you know, the dissonant intervals and all of those things, his rhythm, his composition, like, I mean, his sensibilities, they're almost like, they're so classic. They're like a standard or a folk song.
Yep.
And his harmonic sensibilities was just ingenious, but his melodies are so simple, and what I mean by that is they're so accessible, they're so singable, and then of course the way that he played piano was just so incredibly rhythmic and swinging and inventive and unique. And but you know, if you listen to things like Solo Monk, or you listen to the way that he played, you know, This Is My Story, This Is My Song, it's so simple. It's just triads. But then but you know it's him playing. It's got his sound, and then that's when you realize everything that you just mentioned, like the melody and the harmony and the song framework. That next level of thing is your sound, and that's what you also want to always bring. And that's what's just so amazing to me when you listen to whether it's him or Oscar Peterson or anybody like Bill Evans or Vince Guaraldi, all of these people that will play this different pianos and still sound like them, is amazing. It's just like you realize that their intention just transcends the instrument. And of course, guitar players have that, Bill Frisell, obviously, and so many have that. They just play any guitar, anything. And it's like, I remember seeing him in Denver. He was playing a telly with no effects, and he was just playing through the house amp, and he was just playing like a D chord. I mean, I was sitting right in front of him, and he just played like a D chord.
Yeah.
And it sounded exactly like Frisell.
Yep.
And you're just kind of like, this is pretty magical.
I was literally just going to say that's the magic, and that's the I think that's the hardest. Like when I was like, 18, 19, whatever, every guest artist that came in, I was like, I just want to figure, well, how'd you find your sound, man? Like, when did you get your sound? Like, when did that happen? And they could never, like, there's no answer. And the answer was like, you keep doing what you're doing. Like, it's going to be okay. And I was like, no, tell me right now. And now I'm understanding in small ways that, like, if I just follow my aesthetic, follow what I love and cherish, and it makes me move and groove, and like that's what it is. It's going to take my whole life, and that's okay. It's like part of the process.
Yeah. And
what I love about Monk so much is, like, yes, it's insanely simple, which also makes it super hard. And his comping is literally always the melody or fragments of the melody or just nothing. He's like the most killing comper. If you just listen to comping, I tell my students all the time, because I have a whole thing about comping. Because 80% of the time we're not soloing, we're comping. Anyways, just listen to Monk's comping, and it's always the melody. Yeah. Always. It's so insane, but but it's so rhythmic and goofy and playful that it doesn't always sound like it, but he's just using the melody the whole entire time. And his soloing, of course, is often the melody too. It's all, and that's when I first learned, like, like playing the head is not just like a little gate, a little door I have to open so I can like have this magical, 10-minute solo. It's like, no, that's the whole thing.
Right.
So
that's right.
If he can use that the whole time, then I should be able to, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. And he had that melodic sensibility, and also like he was kind of like a drummer too. And those drummers that when they're taking a solo, they're you can tell that they're singing the melody in their heads. I mean, you could just tell by the way that they're playing. And I think Monk was very drummer like that way too. Like he had just so rhythmic. But and I think Charlie Rouse was amazing too, just the way that he was able to like find his voice within Monk's music is also amazing, because the Monk thing is almost a trap, right? Like you can, especially piano players, like, I mean, it's like they start doing Monk things and it almost sounds like a put on, right? Because they're just like,
right, totally.
So
it's so easy to be like, like quirky voicing is like ting ting ting, oh, I'm Monk. It's like, wow,
right, exactly. And that's like not at all what it's about.
But it's cool to hear like someone like Chick Corea, who played a lot of Monk compositions, and like he didn't play like Monk, he just played like Chick.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Finding your voice is so important. And I think a big part of that is, again, kind of like what we were talking about earlier, like realizing what you don't want to do, maybe realizing your limitations. It's hard to accept that, because you always want to be like, well, I got to do this and I got to practice harder. I know I always felt like that. I'm like, I have to work harder and I have to practice harder. And, I don't feel like that anymore so much, but I did for a long time. But the point being is I think anybody, like whether it's like Jim Hall or Bill Frisell, just who we're talking about, those people that have their own voices, they had the humility at some point to say like, okay, well, I can't do this. Do this. Like they might say like, well, okay, well, obviously Frisell's not going to shred like when people talk about like his generation, it was like Benson and Pat Martino, and those guys were just so technically at a high level. Or look at Wes. I mean, like, you read in interviews Wes talking about, guys like Johnny Smith or Tal Farlow or Jimmy Rainey that were so technically proficient with a pick. And at some point you just have to go with your own thing. And wow, like how lucky are we that Wes trusted his own voice and just did his thing and became, I think he's my favorite all-time guitar player. I mean, it's just that beautiful sound. And so I think that's a part of everybody's journey too, is like being willing to let go of what you aren't, as well as taking a hold of what you are and putting all of those things together in your sound and your voice. It's a lot of your sound is what you are not and what you can't do, and embracing that and being cool with it,
Man, absolutely. I love that so much. I won't keep it much longer, but I'll say, like, I don't know if it's harder now or not, but it's just like the generation I'm in, and just the climate we're in, especially with social media. It's so easy to kind of feel dark on your own playing and want to. You just see so much. You swipe your thumb and you see 80 different players that are better than you or do things that you want to do. It's really tough to just be like, no, I'm right here. This is my thing. Even if it's just a kernel of an idea, that's my thing. I'm going to stick with it. That's tough. But I personally, Zach Jones, I know I don't care about playing Cherokee at 400 BPM. So I know that I'm not going to do that, and I don't care to do that.
Yeah. Right. And I guess, you could just ask yourself, like, what do you listen to? Like, when I want to listen to music, I don't put on Instagram, right. I put on a Ken Burrell record, Yeah. Or even, I mean, it might not even be a jazz guitar. Like, I think to me, ultimately, it comes down to sound and just like what I like. And so I would much rather listen to like Eric Johnson. And Eric Johnson, I've been, I was like in love with his guitar playing since I was 12 or something. But I'd rather listen to him play or a great blues player than listen to jazz with somebody that's like has kind of a weird time feel or like a kind of a weird tone, or you know what I mean? Like, I don't listen to jazz for jazz's sake. Like, I listen to a lot of jazz because I love the artists and what they're doing with it. And
right.
When I listen to Ahmad Jamal, it's like I feel like I'm listening to Ahmad, or Bobby Timmons, the same. Like, and a lot of those, particularly people of that generation, they all had their own sounds. Tommy Flanagan and Oscar and I mean, and everybody, not just the obvious ones, but like every
right
on those, Duke Pearson, like they all had their own thing. And so when I listen to, I love listening to guitar, don't get me wrong, but when I listen to jazz guitar, I'll listen to Pete Bernstein, I'll listen to Kenny Burrell, I'll listen to, Jesse Van Ruler and a lot of contemporary and historic players, because I love their sound and I love their, and it's not because I'm trying to listen to Cherokee at 400 or whatever.
Right. Yeah. It's not tethered to jazz or a certain aesthetic. It's just that you like what they do.
Yeah.
You resonate with it.
Right. Whereas Instagram is such a 30-second show that like you have to, I don't know, like just, and the thing is that you'll never be the best or the top or whatever. I don't know. I had an interesting experience a couple years ago. Now I'm not a classical guitar player. I've loved classical guitar my whole life, but like, it's something that like, I just can't do, or I just never voted me, so that was an example of me saying like, I can't do this. Like, I love John Williams and I love classical guitar, but boy, I cannot do that. So rather, I'm just going to enjoy it and appreciate it and be inspired by it and maybe kind of do my own thing. And then full circle all these years later, I was invited to teach a workshop and perform for the GFA convention, which is like the annual guitar thing. And it was pretty hip because, I was doing my thing and they were very open to that. And they even asked me to, adjudicate and this is a major competition.
Wow.
And I didn't feel comfortable because I don't know. I just like, how could you, I know I can't, like, I can't judge somebody like who's better and, and all of that. And I think, everybody's these days is going to be perfect in terms of like classical guitar players and technical perfection. So you have to look for the deeper thing of musicality. And what is that? That's subjective. That's going to be different for every person. And that's what makes it so beautiful and wonderful, right? Because different aspects of music reach us in different ways. And that's probably not going to translate on Instagram. But when you have a good recording or you go to a concert where you can see something and you give it the time and the opportunity to unfold and just envelop you and take you on a journey, that's where music will always live. There's no doubt about it in my mind. So technology will keep continuing to grow and develop, and sound bites and information overload and all that. But I think that there will always be a desire, and I think we saw this in COVID, for people to want to tune in live or even online to like a full-on musical performance, a statement where you have a prepared program of something that has an arc to it that will draw you in.
Absolutely. I'm sure you've seen lately like all the discussions about like AI art and, just computer generated art or whatever. And while I think those are valid concerns, I don't think we can ever remove the human element or the human desire to want to connect with art via creating it or, consuming it. I don't think that'll ever go away.
No, I agree. And maybe you realize that like your imperfections are maybe the thing that, that makes you human, and all those things. I mean, it's like, we can listen to recordings of Jim Hall and Wes playing where they're like out of tune. Like sometimes I do this with my students. Like there's like on that first Wes organ trio record, they're playing around and they go to the bridge and they're like playing the totally wrong chord. Like Mel Ryan is playing a completely different chord. He's doing like
yeah.
And Wes is hitting Wes is hitting the natural 5 and Mel Ryan's playing a flat 5 chord. And it doesn't even matter, Wes is playing octave, they're out of tune, or like you listen to Jim Hall's Alone Together with Ron Carter and they're out of tune.
Oh yeah.
But it doesn't matter because it's beautiful and it's so inventive and magical and it's so real, it's so human.
Right. That's the human part. Exactly. I listened to a lot of the Miles Davis Second Quintet, and there are so many times where they're definitely lost. They're like 100% lost. But that's the beauty of it. Cause I tell my students all the time, like, we're not here to not make mistakes. We're gonna make mistakes. The difference between good and great is how you get out of it, what you do with that mistake. That mistake could either ruin and tank everything, or it could turn into this like totally new moment. If you trust each other. And that's why I love jazz or just being in any improvised setting, because I love the risk. I love it. Me too. It's so true. When I was living in Philly, I was talking with Robin Eubanks once. And at the time he was playing with Dave Holland's band. He's been playing with that band for a long time. And Chris Potter, incredible. And I just asked him straight up because I had to. I was like, how do you keep the form together? Like long songs and all that. He's like, I don't. And where it's like, I love that.
Avoid getting lost. He's like, I get lost all of the time. We all do. And just that moment of humanity just melted so many like anxieties that I had about it.
Man, for sure.
And you realize it's like, oh yeah, of course, music should be creative and fun and exciting and risk taking, and it shouldn't be academic and pass fail. Like, wow, that is not what it's about at all. But it was very liberating for him to talk about that. I was like, wow, because I had just seen them the night before, and it was amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Sean, thank you so much, man. It's been an absolute treat. Is there anything, how can we find you? How can listeners find you? What do you got in the works this year? Give us the scoop on how we can catch up with you and support you.
Yeah. So I appreciate it. It's been great talking with you, man. So I'm on my website is SeanMcGowanGuitar.com, and my name is spelled SeanMcGowan. I have a brand new pair of courses coming out on TrueFire.com. The modern comping and modern improv. And it's kind of exciting for me because most of my courses on TrueFire are either dedicated to solo guitar or kind of straight ahead playing. And this is the first time where we kind of get into like a lot of substitutions and chromaticism and triad pairs and patterns and doing all kinds of really interesting modern things. So the improv course is coming out January 10th. And the comping course will be out in March. And then I think throughout the year, I'll just be teaching it. You can go to my website, but I'll be teaching at a lot of fun camps. I'm teaching at the Frank Vignola camp next fall, Swannanoa gathering in the summer with a lot of great guitar players. That's going to be a lot of fun. And then, of course, you and I will both be back at the Rocky Mountain Archstop Festival.
That's right.
We're here in Arvada, and that's always going to be an incredible hang. So
yeah. Awesome, man. Well, thank you again so much. Hope you have a fantastic start to your new year.
You too, man. I appreciate the opportunity. Great to talk with you, and let's be in touch, man.
We will. All right, Sean. Thanks.
See you, Zach. Thank you.
Bye.
Wow. What a beautiful conversation with Mr. Sean McGowan. Just such a warm spirit, friendly guy. Clearly, I wish I could go back and study with him, but I really learned a lot, and I hope you did too, just about the music business, taking care of yourself, just following this path and journey no matter where it takes you. I really appreciate you taking the time and listening to Beyond the Frets. I'm really excited to get some new content out there this year. I'm going to have upcoming episodes with Peter Mazza, Abigail Compst, and many more special guests. I'll let you in on a little project. I will be writing a book this year. I'm going to keep it under wraps as far as the content, but rest assured, it's going to be a really exciting project that I'm going to be starting in earnest this summer. So I'm just putting it out there and manifesting this book. So until the next episode, I hope you have a wonderful couple weeks. Take care.